Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Tim Docking, and I'm the Managing Director at the Refugee Investment Network, and we're really happy to have the opportunity to speak with you over the next hour. Thanks for joining. As many of you know, this is World Refugee Week. The 20th of June, this Saturday, is World Refugee Day, and a lot of events are planned this week, many of which you'll hopefully attend, and this is one of those we think will fit in nicely. But it's a great time to reflect on one of the world's defining social challenges, the well-being and livelihood of 70 million forcibly displaced people. That's 1% of humanity, a stunning number that unfortunately continues to grow. This year is particularly poignant and an important time for stock taking, as COVID-19 has adversely affected the health and livelihoods of people globally. And those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder are suffering the most. And within that group, migrants and refugees have really been hit hard and on multiple fronts. We talk about it within the Refugee Investment Network as a triple hit: a hit on health, a hit on livelihoods, and on growing xenophobia as well, which we're seeing pop up around the world. The Refugee Investment Network looks at this troubled setting through a unique prism, as many of you know. Our goals revolve around increasing refugee lens capital investment and helping to create jobs for refugees and economic growth in host communities. We are investor facing. We act as an intermediary between interested capital and refugee investments. Thus, our theory of change is based on 4 pillars that some of you are familiar with. It's mobilizing capital, field building, changing the negative narrative that we often see surrounding refugees, and trying to change policies so that forcibly displaced people and their hosts get a fair shot at employment, economic integration, and self-reliance. We try to do this using data through our growing network of enterprises, investors, organizations, and people like you who care and can make a difference, and through events like this one today. So we've put together a series of webinars. Today's, as you know, is called Refugee Entrepreneurs in COVID-19, with a focus on the United States. It's the first one. We'll preview the others at the end of this session that are upcoming. Today, we're very proud to be partnering with the Center for Economic Opportunity at the IRC, which has helped us assemble a really great panel of speakers to discuss what's happening on the front lines of refugee entrepreneurship, and they'll be coming on in a minute. However, in response to the current crisis, Refugee Investment Network has also created a couple of other initiatives that I want to mention and we'll go through. We have created the COVID-19 Resilience Fund, or what we're calling Recover Fund, that seeks to raise $1 million and share it with needy refugee entrepreneurs in the US, the Middle East, and in East Africa, through accelerator network that we have through small grants. Again, we'll preview this at the end of this call. Another initiative, and one which we'll get into right now, is a global survey that we conducted, and I think probably some of you, perhaps many of you on this call, responded to, and I wanted to share those results with you and to take a few minutes to highlight some of our findings. This survey was conducted at the end of April and the beginning of May. And it really took 3 groups into consideration: refugee-owned and supporting enterprises, and the investor ecosystem sort of writ large, and we'll define that in a minute. Yeah, you can see there. And refugee accelerators. And I just wanted to share at the outset of this call some of the key takeaways, some of the themes and findings and points of consensus, which includes a highlighting of actions recommended from those various segments and needs that we're finding. So think of this as sort of voices from the front lines. The first group we really interrogated, really were interested in talking with were refugee-owned and supporting enterprises and the challenges they faced. And some of those quotes that we picked out of those were from various countries around the world, and I think these quotes represent them. The first one here is from Sep Jordan. Sep, if you don't know, employs hundreds of refugee artisans living in Jordan. And the notes that we got from them is that they're really trying hard to help subsidize medicines and other basic goods for a lot of their employees. Another note that we got was from Mexico, and that quote is that most of our partner employers, have frozen all their hiring processes. They're seeking new partners that continue to hire. Although we have connected with some, we still need many more. Mexico's labor market will likely require a long time to recover. That will affect refugees and asylum seekers and integration into our society severely. Many donors had to step back from their commitments with us. We have severe funding lacks right now, and that put our ability to continue working in danger in the very near term. That quote was not attributed. The final quote from this group was from ANERNA, the American Near East Refugee Aid Network, which said, how do we continue our refugee serving trainings online, including coding academy, etc.? So they're really having a lot of questions about moving some of their constituents, some of their group onto vocational trainings and emergency response preparedness in an online setting. So when asked what would be supportive of this group, we received responses from a number of them, from Duna Food Systems, for example, based in Washington, D.C., refugee-led organization. They were quoted as saying, conversations about COVID-19 relief need to be carried between us and federal, state, and local agencies because they haven't reacted and reached out to the refugee and immigrant demographics. Solidarity with these groups would help with their resilience and our resilience as well. And finally, a quote from this group from Talent Beyond Borders was that unrestricted funds to support organizations like ours through this period are invaluable, and we face donor delays as a direct result of COVID-19. From within the investor community, which includes the funders broadly, the humanitarian ecosystem, some of the challenges pointed out from our survey include this one from an unidentified contributor from Kenya. And it says, in terms of our mission activities, we've made several adjustments to how we serve our clients in Kenya. Cash transfers, remote case management, and psychosocial support. Front-loaded supplies of medicines, foods, etc. have all taken place. Since movements of people are on hold, our resettlement work is focused on finalizing previous cases, maintaining infrastructure, and improving systems for a future restart. Howard Fisher from Gratitude Railroad commented that awareness is really important about what's going on at the lower rungs of the economic ladder. Some innovations came to light also from the same group here. Ben Yonkman from Village Capital highlighted work that they're doing with the Sorensen Impact Foundation. They've launched an initiative to connect startups responding to the COVID-19 crisis and investors who are actively looking for deals in this space. So that's one to check out at Village Capital's website. Jimmy Wright, who is the CEO of Launch Capital Partners and a client of RIN's, talked about how they're working with their refugee tenants. They've worked out payment plans for those affected, in some cases, and they've mobilized their nonprofit organization at launch to help with donations and rental assistance and pointed refugees towards job opportunities. Refuge Point, which is an active program in Kenya, is actively working with over 200 entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, however, most of those clients have had to suspend their businesses due to COVID. And some previous clients who had succeeded in becoming self-reliant through their business earnings are now coming back requesting basic needs and support. Finally, the accelerator category. Turn Network has conducted a really good study and have assembled a really nice dashboard that you can find at Turn COVID dashboard. They're based in the UK, and their response to this question about what are some of the challenges that they're facing was this: COVID-19 has caused a 45% spike in unemployment in our community and directly affected the personal income of 70% of our partners. This has created a cash flow shortfall of just under £2,000 per partner. So quite simply, the greatest challenge has been for entrepreneurs that are running out of money right now. And you can see that data dashboard at Turn's website. Catalyzer, which is a partner of RIN's based in Australia, also mentioned cash flow, mental health. Financial, however, is the biggest challenge that stems from this pandemic. People being unable to pay rents, and in some cases not having access to investment capital for their businesses. So this is just some of the input that we've gleaned from our survey. Some of the common themes, I think, if we can put that next slide up there, are highlighted here. As you look across these themes for the impact that COVID-19 is having on these various communities, just let me pull out a couple of quotes also that came in during our survey that I thought were particularly poignant and thought-provoking for this group. The first one is again from Sep Jordan, and it's this one here. The risk associated with COVID-19 support is to go back to the charity-driven models which dehumanize refugees. The challenge for us is to stay true to our mission and rely on supply demand to bring refugees above the poverty line now more than ever. And then the final quote I picked up, this is from Amy Slaughter at Refuge Point. She wrote that work on refugee livelihoods cannot wait for conditions to be perfect, like the COVID crisis to be over. The areas where we work are crisis prone, and that fact has been used as an excuse to do little to support refugees' self-reliant ambitions for too long. We can't allow COVID to be used as yet another in a long line of excuses. And so I thought that might be interesting to many of you who participated in this study. Perhaps some of you I have actually cited who are on this call today. But I wanted to highlight those before we get into our panel discussion. So with that as sort of a global view of how the pandemic has been affecting this ecosystem, I want to turn now to probably the reason that you're here today is to hear from the panelists themselves. Our first panelist today is Kasra Movahedi. Kasra has been just a great partner of the RINs. I think as we were preparing for this call, we decided that we connected probably some of our earliest partnership through RIN was through the Center for Economic Opportunity. If you don't know already, Kasra is a director for CEO, which offers affordable loans and to low-income refugees and immigrants and host communities to help them build credit and overcome financial barriers. He previously served as IRC's Deputy Director in San Diego, where he was responsible for overseeing direct service programs, including microenterprise, financial capability, food security, workforce, tax preparation, and lending. Like I said, he's been a great partner to Rin, and I would like to welcome him to this call. Kasra, are you with us there? Can everybody see Meredith Kasra's frame?
Hello.
I think they can probably hear you, Kasra. As we get our technical house in order here, let me just welcome you, Kasra, and pose the first question to you. I think we'll want to probably see Kasra before we get to his slide, which he'll refer to a little bit later. But you know, as we focus in on the U.S. for the rest of this call here and the market here, you know, what have refugee entrepreneurs been experiencing across the United States over the last few months, Kasra? What challenges are you facing, and what's your organization doing to meet those challenges?
Sure. Thank you very much, Tim, for having me and for your kind words and warm introduction. It's been fantastic working with Rin over the years. You know, but by way of challenges, they are many, and there's a lot of different ways to cut into it. The first thing to say is that you know, as I'm sure we all understand, refugees are not a homogenous group in the United States, and so there's lots of different kind of educational backgrounds, English language levels, life experiences, and so, you know, broadly speaking, there is a just want to make the note that it's hard to kind of put everyone into one bucket. That said, the general challenges that we've seen from the economic shutdowns and social distancing and kind of all of the impacts of that have really been consistent with what you may have heard in the news of small businesses being left out largely of a lot of the federal stimulus, PPP, and other SBA and non-SBA products that have been kind of stood up in response. I would say that not only then have small businesses been shut out, but refugees specifically, because of some of the unique barriers that tend to be common. You know, on the microenterprise side, some of the paperwork challenges of gathering the documents that you need, the processes that were put in place can be pretty difficult to navigate. And you couple that with a first come, first serve race to get your documents in, and we saw a spate of you know, of hardship of people not being able to access funds. Later today, we'll hear from panelists, and I think that situation has improved to a degree, but it is still kind of, you know, it's a bit touch and go at the moment. Organizationally, CEO had 750 active loans when COVID hit. About half of those were credit building, about another 450 were our traditional, you know, business and auto loans largely. And then we had a host of education and training, personal loans, and some other smaller products. Our initial response, you know, has been to understand that clients are going to be facing cash flow crunches, and that there is really, you know, an unprecedented uncertainty, right? And having misplaced the pandemic playbook for how lenders should support clients, we've taken steps to simply reduce our interest rates to 0% going back to March 1st, and have deferred payments for anybody that needs a deferment, and it's been kind of a rolling thing where we've had to continue to raise funds to be able to extend this runway for people. But the idea is that we don't want our clients to continue to incur interest right now when everything is up in the air and unclear. And we also don't want to further tax those the monthly cash flow from having those payments be collected while still maintaining the supporting everyone's credit. And so our strategy has been largely to hold things down and hold things up as long as we can, and try to ride this out, see if we can't get some more clarity as events continue to unfold.
Yeah. Well, this is really interesting. I mean, we started to hear about those plans right from the outset when COVID hit. It was part of the SIF fundraise that we were working on. And I don't know if you want to talk at all about sort of that partnership and the work we're doing there, and how that
Certainly.
dovetails with this.
It's it's COVID has had such negative, deeply negative impacts on businesses and individuals that I don't mean to try to elicit any kind of sympathy. However, as COVID hit, Rin and CEO had pulled together a group of investors to secure a social impact fund that we were going to use to continue to fuel our rapidly growing portfolio and pipeline. And as soon as COVID hit, the whole world changed, as I'm sure we've all experienced. And in a testament to the quality of the relationships that we were able to build with Rin's support and this cohort of investors, that not only did no one back out, everyone doubled down in their commitments and continued to. We modified the terms to allow for a longer funding period so that CEO wouldn't have to take on a whole lot of capital right now when our demand had just plummeted off a cliff. And that has been vital in allowing us some operational flexibility. And we have since now closed on the first tranche of that, or we're in the process of closing with several of the investors. And that's going to fuel one of our responses that's on deck, which is a subprime auto loan refinance product. We think we can do a lot of good with that. Those same investors that were organized via Rin, separately, when they heard about our plans to support our existing portfolio, but then also our COVID response, given the volume of opportunities for businesses to get forgivable loans, we didn't come out with a business supporting loan, and rather relied on IRC's network of economic empowerment and microenterprise staff to connect clients to these resources to help them overcome some of those challenges. Those products are far better suited to clients. So our response then, in terms of a product response, was to roll out a small 0% resilience loan that families can access up to about $2,100 at 0% with 6 months of no payments. The idea being, here's cash today with no risk, and in 6 months' time, we will look to figure out where we are.
Is that a product now that you're rolling out?
That is live. We've done probably over 50 of those loans now. And we have been able to expand to the other 25 offices, to all 25 offices within IRC's network. And so these resilience loans are now available in 13 states and 25 offices, and we are live right now. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about and share with the audience some of the plans. What does the future look like? We're not going to always be in this COVID position here. What are your plans for expansion and prospects for really helping to strengthen this community?
I think you're absolutely right. We don't know how long we're going to be here, but it won't be forever. And there will be I think that, especially as we get to recovery, I think what we can do in the meantime, when there's no floor to stand on and events are still unfolding, is going to be fraught with lots of making sure that we're doing this right. And this is kind of a new world that everyone's operating in. As we get to the recovery, though, we think that our financial products, so we offer not just business loans, but small dollar, credit building, personal, auto loans. All of these products we think can be incredibly helpful in helping families to reclaim and recover more rapidly, and to help fuel that recovery. So we're kind of in this situation where we have a suite of products ready to go. Meanwhile, and until we get there, we're looking to selectively continue to make deals that make sense, and focus on some of the subprime auto bailout to try to support family budgets and help them keep hold of those assets. Yeah,
super. Okay, well, if you wouldn't mind sitting tight, Kasra, I'd like to bring one of your colleagues, Irene, in on this conversation at all. I kind of see you sort of seeing the very big picture and being able to reflect on what you're seeing across the United States. But Irene is based out of San Diego. She's a micro enterprise business counselor at IRC, with a special emphasis on supporting female refugee entrepreneurs. And in this role, Irene works with entrepreneurs to start and formalize their businesses, gain access to capital, and to grow. She has almost 10 years of experience working in the refugee community, both as a volunteer and as at the professional level, and she herself is a former refugee from Uganda. So Irene, thank you so much for taking time today to join us. And I think as soon as you speak, you'll pop up on the big screen here. Hello, Irene.
Hello, Tim. Thank you for introducing me. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to all of you about our clients and what they're going through. I really appreciate that, and thank you for those warm words. Yeah. So,
Irene, I wonder if you could start just telling us a little bit about your story, about how you came to the United States and what was your experience when you left East Africa in that period.
Yeah, so like I came to the US as a refugee. I was born and raised in Kenya. And at the age of 19, I found myself displaced in Kenya because one of my uncles had been working for the government, but then had defected from the government, and then because of that they were looking for him, but then it affected the whole family. So that's how we ended up escaping to Kenya, where we spent 3 years in Kakuma refugee camp. It's in northern eastern Kenya. And then after staying there for over 3 years, that's how we were able to get resettled here in the US.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And so what better person than you to sort of be on the point working with people who've been displaced living in the United States. Tell us about sort of what you're experiencing on sort of, I guess, the front lines working with people. You know, how is this COVID virus sort of changed your day-to-day and the lives of your clients?
Yeah, so this crisis has affected everyone, but mostly it has affected our small business owners. I'll tell you one.
I think you went on mute, Irene. There you are.
Yeah, so I know there is a lot of help from the government, but the help is really not reaching everyone at the same time. Like Kasra pointed out, we had here in San Diego, we are also a small business development center. So we are reaching clients with the from small communities with small businesses. But going back to the story that I was going to tell you is, I had one client who has been a salon owner here in San Diego for about 30 years. And then all of a sudden, like after the crisis hit, she didn't know what to do. What she did was like, she was in the house for about the first 2 months, not doing anything, and didn't know what is going to happen with her. So when she reached to us, and she told me she was very depressed because of she didn't have money to pay for her rent at the salon where she was doing her business, and then she didn't have money to pay for her own bills at home, and then she was behind on so many things that she could not be able to move forward after the crisis. So in that, we tried to apply for the PPP with her, and I was doing the second round, but still she was not, she got a PP, but it wasn't enough because whatever that she was taking home as owner's draw was very small. for her to be able to pay the bills that she had fallen behind in the last 2 months. So those are just one of the many stories.
When I was looking through some articles to sort of prepare for this call, I came across a statistic which it didn't shock me, but it just reminded me how important immigrants are to Main Street in the United States. And you mentioned that your client owned a salon. And the statistic that I have from Fundera is that 28% of Main Street businesses, those businesses like salons or grocery stores or restaurants that we have in the United States are led by immigrants into the United States. Almost a third of those sorts of businesses are led by immigrants. So the work you're doing is vital. I mean, it's so much that nearly half of economic growth in the United States, said this study I read from Fundera, between 2000 and 2013 was due to immigrant business owners. So it's just fundamental, and we continually have to get the word out on the street how important your clients and the work you do is. What do you, when you look at your clients, and we've been doing this now for, we sort of gotten over the shock, where do you see the most need right now, and where do you add the most value when you interact with them?
So our clients, I think where I see the most need is like because when I see clients who have been here for a few months and who have been here for a long time, like the one I just talked about. But the difference is like when this client comes from different countries, the way of doing business is different. Like setting up the system, the paperwork, the record keeping, and all these meticulous things that make the business work is the area that I see a lot of need. That's why, like, when we do technical assistance, helping them formalize their business and also be able to grow their business to a point whereby it's just not an income to take home, but to continue growing, hopefully to the point where they are able to employ other people and make it like a viable business. So that's where we see a more need to also accessing capital is another one, because like growing their credit to a point where they are able to go from accessing capital from this small CDFI to reach commercial banks, or it's where there's also a lot of need, and also has to, all of this ties in with keeping their paperwork, being able to know the better business practice.
As a woman, how does that affect sort of your work in the field? I mean, do you hew more towards sort of female clients? Do you have more women coming to you? And what sort of insights can you bring to female entrepreneurs?
Yes, so I have working mostly with the women from the women refugee community. And the reason why this is very important, because women, when they, there's an article I read, but this is also true. When they make money from these businesses, they support the whole families. And most of our refugee clients have very low literacy level. They have low English level. So like just being able to grow, navigate the barriers in growing their business is hard. And then added all on top of that, just like added barriers of not having the English capacity and not being able to know the culture of the country to integrate, it can be really hard. But with that said, we have seen a lot of tremendous change when these women start their business. Like someone starts a childcare, you see them coming from not even being able to provide for the family and becoming a main provider of the family within like 6 to 1 year. That was like prior to COVID-19. So having female micro-enterprise business entrepreneurs is very crucial to the integration of refugee families here in the US.
Yeah, yeah, extremely important. Well, I want to save a little bit of time so that we give you all a chance to come back and bring some other observations from this entire session at the end. But I want to bring in, before we run out of time, Jawad, who's a business owner, a refugee himself from Iraq. He's the owner of the Crepe House Cafe in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is sort of the person on the end of the IRC CEO pipeline there, where they're helping to loan monies and share business skills. So Jay, we'll welcome you, and I'll give you a quick introduction here. Jay was forced to flee Iraq with his family when he was in 2008. And upon arriving in the United States, he began pursuing his studies, and within the year, completed his degree. He gained citizenship and worked hard towards his goal of opening his creperie, which he now owns. With his hard-earned savings and with the startup loan from CEO, he formally launched business of his Parisian-style, Parisian-inspired cafe in January of this year. So Jay, we're delighted that you could join today. And if you speak, I think you'll pop up onto the screen as well. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you guys having me.
Hey, great. Thanks for joining. Here you are, an immigrant into the United States, worked hard, saved up all your money, started business in January, and then COVID hit. How's it been?
Yeah, actually, this is like a very special and like unique situation that I was in, that I got a little bit unlucky when, like, I put everything into my savings and all my plans and my goals. I put it into starting a new business, and COVID hit, so it definitely impacted me and hit me differently than other businesses that already were running for a year or two. So that was like a tough one.
Absolutely. We know that having a startup in any environment at any time is really a challenge. And so how have you, sort of benefited from, what have you learned from CEO, and how have, sort of these programs that we hear about, like PPP, for example, or interfacing with the Small Business Administration, these other things, have you been able to lever those programs at all to help you out during this time?
Yes, as we spoke about, I kind of gave a brief like summary of what I dealt with in the past couple of months. We tried to apply for the PPP program, and there was like a really lack of communication with the banks communicating with directly with the PPP. And at some point I got a couple of emails that they're out of funds, and they requested a lot of documents, and after a while of like collecting the documents they needed, I got approved, but not even enough, like not even like a 20%, like maybe 30% of what I really need to cover my expenses that I paid for the rent and everything. So it was a hassle dealing with the PPP program and getting approved. And even when I got approved, it wasn't enough for me to cover the expenses and the money I lost.
Yeah. So where are you now? Are you back in business? You're based in Phoenix. I think your creperie is it in a mall? Is that where you're based?
Yes,
right
yes. It's a shopping center. It's an outlet mall in Phoenix, Arizona, located I don't know if you guys familiar, like closed downtown Phoenix. And I closed March 16th, and I just opened last week around May 8th.
Okay. And how are you finding sort of the business environment there right now?
I mean, most of the businesses there are still closed. Like about 50% of the businesses are still closed, but slowly opening back up. There's a little bit of traffic than before, than the past like 2 months. And another factor here in Arizona, it's a little bit hot, so the time being, a lot of people are not outdoors so much. So yes.
Yeah. Really interesting to hear some of your experience getting through this period here. I'd like to invite Kasra to rejoin, and Irene to rejoin, and just briefly to maybe, we've sort of taken this conversation from sort of the global at the outset of this call down to the level now that Jay's at right now, which is really sort of the tip of the spear here. Kasra, as you hear, I don't imagine every day, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't imagine every day you're speaking with business owners. What are some of your observations, or what are you hearing from some others perhaps that are either in Irene's role or in Jay's role right now?
I think the most recent news that we've received has been more positive relative to what it was, in that subsequent waves of relief for small businesses have now started to reach many of our clients, and that we're starting to see some meaningful dollars be accessed by the entrepreneurs that we're supporting.
Yeah. Irene, as you hear Jay, I mean, you're working with people like Jay every day, I imagine. This is a common story, I imagine you're hearing. Do you hear anything different from the woman's point of view or perspective, or perhaps regionally in San Diego versus Phoenix?
No, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, at the first, it was really frustration, and slowly, like Kasra said, we are starting to see our small business owners starting to access capital either through the last rounds of PPP, because after now the CDFI started funding it, there is more success stories than when they were just dealing with the commercial banks. We are also starting to see when they started accessing the PUA, this is pandemic unemployment, for independent contractors, we have seen the situation start to improve.
Do you have insights on how long these programs are set to be in effect? How much longer people like Jay can draw on these new initiatives from the government? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, so for the pandemic unemployment, it's going to end next month, I believe on the 29th of July, and that's they'll not be able to get the extra 600. And then for the PPP program, application is closing on the 30th of this month, but with the most banks actually going to be on the 26th. So it's they're at the end, towards the end right now.
Okay.
I would, Tim, just one thing I would interject is that, I personally cannot remember at all living in a time when the range of outcomes that are possible in as short a time frame as a few weeks or few months has been so wide. And it's, it is just fundamentally, it feels like this perpetual state of limbo, waiting for some clearer signs of what resolution looks like. And it's interesting seeing diverging takes on where we are in the country, but everything from society reopening to what the government assistance looks like post July, when a lot of these programs are set to expire. are going to have significant impacts on, you know, on the lives of the clients that we're supporting. And there's just so little insights that are even possible to have at this moment. It's uniquely challenging.
Absolutely. Jay, back to you. You know, from your perspective here as a new business owner, you know, have you, what you know, if you would have known probably what you do now about the business environment back in January when you opened your doors, you're probably thinking the first thing is you probably wouldn't have opened your doors right then. But here we are. What needs were not met during that period there? What could have been done better? You mentioned paperwork. You mentioned some of these programs. You know, looking back on it now, what do you wish you would have been able to have available to you?
Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, looking at it back right now, I never really thought about the whole process, but looking back at it right now, maybe things would have, like the process would have maybe been faster. That would have helped a lot. And then maybe grant the people, like business owners and entrepreneurs, like give them the right amount they deserve, which is, for me, it was a hassle also dealing with my landlord to trying to negotiate my rent, because I'm in a shopping center and the rent is expensive. So that's like a particular situation for me. So I had to pay rent for like literally 2.5 months. And then, but if my PPP would have came earlier, maybe I would have negotiated a better deal for the rest of my for my lease, you know, because now they lowered my rent a little bit, but I've been waiting this whole time for funds so I could pay for these 2.5 months and to continue my business. So maybe quicker into like getting the process done and, you know, getting the right amount to the business owners.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Kasra and Irene and Jay, I just want to pose, give you a little bit of time, you know, to say some things that I probably missed, or maybe some things as you reflect on this conversation that you want to convey to the people who are on this call today, thinking about who is in the audience today as we discussed yesterday and previewing this call. You know, we have interested capital partners on the call today, some investors, some people from the humanitarian and development communities. We've got people that represent accelerators, sort of like the CEO that are working with people in the front line. And we have entrepreneurs themselves. I mean, maybe Kasra, you can kick it off here, but you know, with all of this now, you know, you think of how we were working together, raising funds at the beginning of the year, and then this crisis occurred. You know, what have you taken away from this, and what sort of message with regards to refugee entrepreneurs would you like to convey to that audience?
You know, I think the one of the fundamental things for me that I keep going back to as a lender is having made, you know, those 750 loans that I mentioned. All of those were underwritten in a fundamentally different economic landscape, right? And they all reflect, largely speaking, people who have been dealt a poor hand and have started over in the United States, and you know, all of the loans were taken on in support of self-betterment and building assets and hard work. And so, you know, as with COVID, especially for that cohort that had their loans prior, right? And so we've continued to make loans afterwards, and that's a different story. But I think that in those situations, that particular kind of cohort, in our estimation, is deserving of enhanced funding, support, and just, you know, the universal kind of sense of fairness is not resting well. And the fact that they still have debt outstanding to us is something that we'd like to address. And I think that many refugee entrepreneurs, especially those smaller businesses that are going to be not the priority for a lot of these PPP loans and other kind of institutional supports that are coming out, are going to be in a similar strait. And so I would urge everyone to, while there is clearly a need for the traditional kind of lending, and I think with caution around moving into a model that is just disempowering and grant aid, I think there is a large need for grant-based supports right now to help folks dig out and to help reclaim some of what has been lost. And I think that loans specifically are going to have just some hard limits in how they can be deployed. And why I'm very grateful for RIN's efforts to raise grant funds and some of the other programs that have cropped up to support that. I would really underscore that.
Yeah. Thanks. It's always at these times of crisis when the light is really shown on some of the weaknesses in the system and where the needs really do lie. So I think you do a good job sort of highlighting those areas that we should really not forget about as things hopefully return to normal, but double down in those areas and really work to improve those. Irene, do you have any thoughts as you sort of reflect on this quick conversation that we've had, but really sort of your day-to-day, I don't know if your job work has been crazy, it probably has, like it has been for all of us over these last 3 months that you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say that refugees and immigrants who have been here, and they strive for the same purpose of dreaming, building the American dream. And the way they build this dream is through becoming integrated and starting their small businesses and helping the communities that they come from. And this crisis affecting them has affected all of us, but then affected them the most because their livelihood depends on this business, and the community that they serve also livelihood depends on this kind of business. I have a few clients who sell like culture food from their country of origin, and when this crisis hit, they have been priced out. They are not able to access the inventories to their stores so that they are able to reach people to sell this, and then the prices go up. So this is like a chain reaction that goes from up down. And then if they don't have access to capital to be able to reestablish, you can imagine, because most of where the migrants and refugees, where the places where they live is low income, and oftentimes it's food desert areas. So they are not able to reach like these huge grocery stores. So those corner stores that they migrant-owned businesses start are very crucial, not only to the business owners, but to the community at large. So supporting them is very, very important.
Yeah, thank you. Really poignant observations. Jay, we talked a little bit about yesterday about your connections to perhaps an Iraqi community around Phoenix and other entrepreneurs. So as you reflect on the question that I asked, maybe you can maybe draw on a story or two from not just yourself, which you've told us really well, but what you're also seeing amongst your sort of fellow refugee entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned yesterday, I know a couple of business owners around the Phoenix area, and actually one of the business owners, he opened a burger shop, which was about maybe 5-6 months ago, before the COVID-19 hit. And his business was like, he had a lot of overhead. It was like a big dine-in burger shop. So he had to sell the business and have somebody to take over his lease, and he took a big loss on this. That's like one of the stories I've seen. And other people, they had to close the business for good. And they've been in business for 3 years. They had like a shawarma place where they sell like, sandwiches, and they do catering events. And, that's really sad, because the other people, they had their business for like 3-4 years. And like a lot of people from the community, they go there because they have really good prices and really good food, and and now they're closed for good.
Yeah. Well, we know there's a lot of hard stories out there. We're hopeful for yours and for all the work that the team from CEO has been doing to help people like you. I want to, as I bring this session to an end, I really want to sincerely thank you for taking time out of your day and for sharing your insights with this group. I thought the exchange was really rich, and thank you very much. I also want to thank Danielle Luna from IRC CEO, who was really helpful in setting up this call. She's working in Phoenix with Microenterprise as a counselor there. I want to thank sincerely Meredith Husser, who is organized this call today, and Caitlin Rowe, who's our intern. We're so lucky to have during this summer. Of course, I always want to thank our Chief Operating Officer, Joanne K. Edelman, and my partner, John Kluge, and of course, GDI. Before I bring this to a close, though, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We've preserved a couple of minutes left here. As I mentioned at the outset of this call, RIN has started the Refugee COVID Resiliency Fund. We're calling it Recover. We've launched that to create a small, almost micro grants setup along in partnership with a number of accelerators. CEO is one of those accelerators, but we've also selected and are honored to be working with in the Middle East, a Juicer, which is a terrific accelerator, and 51 Labs, as well as in Sub-Saharan Africa and East Africa, the Africa Entrepreneur Consortium, AC. So I want to bring that to everyone's attention. We've gotten a very strong start with that raise, and again, it's a small grants fund to help people like Jay and others around the world sort of pay their bills until we get through this tough time right now. I also wanted to mention in the last minute we have here that our webinar series is coming up, and this is just the first of a number of conversations that RIN will be having we'll be hosting and having over the coming weeks. Upcoming webinars will focus on how COVID has affected refugee entrepreneurs in the Middle East and Africa, specifically, take a deep dive there. And then we will look at how accelerators in our accelerator network, which I've mentioned several times during this call, are helping to grow refugee livelihoods as well. RIN fellow Betsy Alley has drawn up just a really strong report that we're beginning to put pieces out even as early as probably next week. And before we put the whole report out, her analysis of the global Refugee Accelerator Network and some insights into that group. That'll be a forthcoming webinar as well. So thank you all for joining today. Don't forget Saturday is World Refugee Day. Also, don't forget the RIN Refugee Investing Lens, which we continue to try to socialize and our work as well. Please join our network. Join up on our website to get invitations to forthcoming events. They'll be sent directly to your inbox, so you're sure not to miss something. So with that, I want to conclude this session, and thanks everyone for joining.